what you have in your head right now, take that and consider it with the question, was that a weapons test?
Which? The War of the Worlds?
The radio broadcast.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the goons to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings, this is Byrne, your friendly Anadromist, coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia. And if you're wondering why it sounds so echoey, it's because I'm in the apartment I just started renting, although I won't be totally moved in here for a month and I've got a lot of work to do. And essentially apartments like this are a dead zone until you start doing something to it. And I'll show you the process as we go and more about the apartment. But that's not what I want to talk to you about. What I'd like to talk to you about is what's not a dead zone is having good conversations with people on YouTube. And today, obviously, we'll be talking to Grizwald Grimm. That's not his real name, obviously. And but he is a very real character, and in fact he was interested in the subject of character. But before I ramble on in this dark space, let's go ahead and check things out with Grizz. I'm holding. I don't know if I want to hold that though.
Hello, I am currently recording for
I am
history's sake.
I'm going to put this on my channel in about a week probably, so don't put it on yours before then, but you can cut it up and do whatever you want to it.
Yeah, I like to do a teaser promo clips.
Yeah, that's fine. And yeah, well, I figured like I wouldn't go with any specific subject because your whole MO is kind of like cut and paste. I mean, and that's like your philosophy is very much, you're like a very natural postmodern surrealist, even if you don't quite get all that in terms of, I mean, you're not philosophically those things, but I think there's a difference between philosophy and style. And stylistically, the cut and paste, meme, all of that is very postmodern, but you take it one step further, which I really appreciate, into this other realm of kind of like, well, the surrealist takes two objects that are very different from each other and puts them together and then comes up with whatever, you know, out of that. And I find your material kind of hits that part of my brain.
Well, a lot of it's not mine.
Oh, I know.
Like, it's like, well, like none of it's mine, but when it like so a lot of it just comes together. Like for example, the live stream last night, that like I had seen that claymation thing before.
Right.
And I've been given that by a friend, and it was in my head, and then I heard her say those things, and like a piece clicked for me.
Right.
And then I got on the live stream and I threw it together.
Right.
And the fact that like it landed, like the way it played out,
right.
Her, when she changed speaking, the claymation lined up perfectly.
Right.
That just happened through.
Right. But that's very much the surrealist modus operandi, because people weren't doing that before the surrealists started doing that in the early mid 20th century. And one of the things.
Can I stop you? I want to put something at the front. Like, hi everybody. I'm Grizwald. I'm General Grizwald Gaius Grimm of the First LARP Aggression Protocol, and I'm building an army of 12 monkeys. This is Byrne Power over here.
Yeah, what you don't realize is I'm going to put another. I don't ever just put these up like dripping material. I always go back. I don't edit it usually in the middle, but what I will do is edit a little at the beginning and the end, and then put a little introduction of my own at the beginning, depending on what goes on, you know. So, but yes, am I right in assuming that Grizwald might be your last name, or is it like a tribute to Clark Griswold from the Vacation movies?
More the latter.
That's what I kind of was wondering. So, yeah, and what is your name? Who knows? Who cares? You're here. I'm here.
There's a meat sack. I mean, there's a legal fiction associated with a social security number that's going to get sued and pay for everything that I do.
Right. Well,
But
people ask me if I'm actually Byrne Power.
Mhm.
The answer to that is yes, but there is a further distinction to be made. I wasn't actually born with that name, but I was given it when I was being adopted by a certain Mr. Power when I was 7 years old. And I was really a Bernard. And he said, as we were moving from Hawaii to California, San Francisco Bay Area, right before the 60s started, he said to me, would you rather be Bernard or would you rather be Byrne, B-Y-R-N-E? And I thought about Bernard for a minute, and I was just old enough to know, they're going to call me Saint Bernard. And I really didn't like Bernie. And I said, yeah, I'll go with Byrne. And, you know, because I was moving and no one would really know me. So it wasn't like I had to explain myself to anybody. But little did I know, I was heading straight into the 60s. And I was in like, you know.
So you were 7 and didn't realize that Byrne Power was a cool name?
Well, I realized it was cool. No, what I didn't realize is what was going to happen with teasing in high school by the end of the 60s. So that, for instance, it was like Byrne, baby Byrne, or it was like, oh, I'll save this one. But I had one guy who said, you know, Byrne Power. He said, ooh, hot energy. And then someone else said, hey, your mother had a sunburn. I always thought that was
that one. Cool. I like
that was more of a higher class.
Here's to wordplay, right?
Well, it was also the time that song by the Crazy World of Arthur Brown came out called Fire. And I don't know if you know that song, but near the end of it, he goes, you're gonna burn, burn, burn. And sometimes people do that, and then he goes, you know, and I got that one too. So
remember, everybody.
Burned Out. That was another one.
That's a life goal. That's a life goal.
Yeah.
So what did you make of the world, man?
No, one of the things I find fascinating about, I listened to your, by the way, if anyone is interested in who this guy is, because I'm not going to go that deeply into it. You can find out more if you go to Paul Vanderklay's channel, and they talk more about some of your background and stuff. But
you want to find out who I am? Just watch the thousands of live streams that are constantly coming out.
Yeah, no, but what I find interesting is, I mean, from listening to that, I you know, one of the things that you often do is you'll say these things that are very weird. Again, it goes with this weird surrealist thing that, like I say, in you, it's just a natural habit. Like surrealists love the alphabet because weird random things just get stuck together. Whereas I prefer more order, like, oh, let's start with the subject of God and end up with the subject of, you know, like the Bible with the end of times. But in the surrealist view,
now, like,
yeah, exactly.
We're in the apocalypse, Byrne.
But in the surrealist view, the alphabet puts together weird things that don't necessarily belong. So, for instance, if you pick up the Encyclopedia Britannica, for years they had a book that, you know, it started with Chicago and ends with death, that one particular section. So it's always like the Chicago death section, which I think is just brilliant. You know, that weird cluster of things. I mean, one of the people I've gotten a lot out of over the years is the puppet filmmaker Jan Schwenkmeyer, who is an actual philosophical surrealist. And you don't go into his work with, you know, just wanting a happy puppet film with Muppets. You go in there expecting your brain's going to be twisted into knots by the time you're done, but it's really fascinating. But
what's the fascinating is a good word.
Yeah.
Off of faceted. But like in surreal, what's the front of surreal?
What?
Because I think
Sur means over or above, real means real. So the
like that's like
surrealist means
that's
something that's
meta,
more
but
real.
not.
Yeah, but it's dreamlike. And it's also innocent. So the surrealist really liked the art of children, just kind of random art of children. They also like the art of
That sounds disturbing. What
they
do you
also
mean by
like the art of insane people. There's a whole museum in
oh yeah, because that's the veil is thinner for those for the young and the insane. I mean, it's kind of like that's kind of like an it is known Khaleesi thing, that like the veil is thinner for the children and insane. But like I think what's going on now is more meticulous and more and so it's like post-ironic, self-referential.
We've entered a zone where everything is up for grabs, because I look at it as we've entered the zone of total noise. And part of my theory is about where the modernist era, the modernists were always borrowing things. So in the Renaissance, they were going back to the classical world. The romantics were going back to the Middle Ages. The hippies were going back to the 1920s and 30s, or the cowboys and Indians, except they wanted to be the Indians. The punks
but we're on the top of everything now.
Like, but what happened?
You have your whole library. That's like this leaning tower of stuff that's burning in this fire.
Exactly. Sometime around the end of the
night. Hold on. I got to do savings throws. You can pick survival, social, wisdom, or heart. You don't have to tell me. You can keep it inside your head. But the roles were as follows: survivalists got a 1.
Mm-hmm.
Socialists are all right with the 14.
Yeah.
Wisdom, the sophists got a 12, like disciples, and heart, double 9s. Good going.
Total stochastic method, totally surrealist. There you go. So I would say let's go with survival. That sounds good.
No, that was the nat 1. That's not good.
It's not good?
No, you're completely subject to the following mind control. Those are mind control savings throws, and you get to pick like which you want to base your role on for the mind control that follows. And so you're getting indoctrinated here, Byrne. Welcome to the Kool-Aid. You're a big part of what's going. I feel like you stood out like Sevilla did when you came on Paul's channel as like a rando that wasn't rando.
Surely not exactly the same though.
No, but like a category. Like yes. Categorically, it's like
no. I always see myself
it's a rando with a channel and with an audience, and yours is particularly supportive. So I should note that I have a Patreon.
Right. I don't have a Patreon. I just have people who managed to come up with the lion's share of $10,000+ to help me move my stuff, which I'm still got to do this year, but I'm getting closer to my goal. So these people are absolutely amazing. And
that's
I just
the agency, sir.
Which
you work for the agency?
Yeah.
There is no agency, but like if it's like the human attention agency.
I have good representation.
The eyes of the panopticon. Like if you catch the eyes of a whale, a crypto whale, some kid who got rich,
right,
and like sees the value in the physical library and feels it's safer in Tbilisi than in Alaska, they'll throw their crypto money at you.
Yeah. Well, for some reason, I'm here, not fully sure why yet. For instance, I started doing this because I was here. I could have done it in Alaska 5 years ago. Someone had suggested back in 2010, Byrne, you should do podcasts. You have all this stuff. And I was like, whatever. But when
it's like in Meat Space Reality, you're a manifestation of the Citadel from Game of Thrones, where Sam goes to study.
Yeah.
And so like people will support you. You have that attention hook. And then like ethereally, you're the Andromist with like your podcast and your view and your content. So you exist on both planes well. And you're, a pleasurable interface for the the embodied manifestation.
Well, I'm ready for anybody. I've often said, I've hung out around Christians, and I'm often like, guys, learn, you guys get really concerned about, like sending missionaries to the cannibal tribes in New Guinea or something, and how you have to learn their language and their mythology before you can talk to them, this whole Peace Child book thing. And I said, why don't you do that with normal people? Because whether you know it or not, the rug has been pulled out from under everyone, and everything is changing. It's like Bob Dylan said, the wheel's still spinning, and it's still in spin, and it's no telling who that it's naming. And that's where we are right now. Is everything is just.
Where was War of the Worlds for you? When did, like,
Which one?
Orson Welles one?
You're talking about the book, the Orson Welles?
Like, no, just like your encounter with the hyper object of that thing, like from
well, like I say, I've run into
the original radio show. From the
No.
original radio show to when you heard about it, when
I
you
didn't hear about that. I heard about it as a kid from my mother, who actually was old enough to not so much experience it. She was only about 5 years old at the time, but to see the chaos that her parents' world was going through because of it. And there was all these legends and rumors about how many people killed themselves, and she would tell me that. Later, I ran into
how deep into that can you go? Like how much of that can you bring up? What she told you?
What she told me?
Yeah,
not that much. She tended to be the kind of person who was very much would take the givens of her times, which was mostly the 40s and 50s, early 60s was kind of her era when she was still kind of blossoming. And I often thought, I was very, very different than my mother. And I often thought it was just me. And she'd gotten married 3 times by the time I was 7, because back then women didn't jump from man to man without getting married. Later, by the end of the 60s, that whole thing got thrown into the dust. And then after a while, it was just body to body, contact games. So I think that, no, the next thing, I did read the book when I was a teenager. I also,
what's the book?
War of the Worlds.
By, like, it was a book before it was a radio play?
No, H.G. Wells. It's originally a book by H.G. Wells from 150 years ago. So,
okay.
And then
the radio play caused the chaos. But
then there was a record album, which had like the Moody Blues and other people on, a lot of English singers, and it was a double record album called War of the Worlds, which has a pretty good introductory song, but the whole thing is a little bit forgettable. And then I bought the album. I've had 2 different versions of the War of the Worlds broadcast. So I've memorized the whole thing. I've chopped it up and used it in various, I made tape collages back in the 1980s. And some of the radio broadcasts is just perfect to throw into things, because it's just like Orson Welles stumbling along and he meets someone who's like a survivalist talking about it's time for us to get back at the aliens and all this stuff. And it was perfect paranoid stuff. You could see why people, if you came in halfway in the middle of that thing, what he did was he told everyone at the beginning it was a fake, but didn't keep saying it. So you know how people turn into the radio. They don't come at exactly 9 o'clock if it starts at 9 o'clock. They show up 10 minutes later, or someone says, hey, this weird thing's on, or more likely, hey, what's going on in New Jersey?
Okay, all right.
I saw
what you got in your head right now.
Steven Spielberg movie.
What you have in your head right now, take that and like consider it like with the question, was that a weapons test?
Which? The War of the Worlds?
The radio broadcast.
The original one? No, I don't think so. I think it was, knowing what I do about Orson Welles, he was a really cocky, arrogant guy who had stuff to prove. He had been on Broadway and New York theaters doing all sorts of stuff. The radio show was out of New York. His orchestral conductor for the thing was Bernard Herrmann, who is my favorite film composer. Who later, the 2 of them went to Hollywood, and then Bernard Herrmann stayed there and did all these amazing films, from his first being Citizen Kane, his last being Taxi Driver, and in the middle he did Alfred Hitchcock.
That's that guy. What's his name?
Bernard Herrmann. Great guy.
Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's because those are legendary.
Yeah. So, but no, Wells was, when he got to Hollywood, he was, because what they did is they recognized what a genius he was for coming up with this idea. Now, he got in a lot of trouble for it too. Whatever was took the place of the FCC in those days. I don't know if they had that exactly labeled as such, but there was certainly.
What function do you think the FCC serves?
To
literally and like
policing.
Purportedly.
I worked in radio, so I know when we've gotten over the line, and I occasionally have done radio that was over the line. Not that I got in trouble for it because I was in Alaska and nobody was listening then. They are now because everything's online too. I couldn't get away with.
How do you feel about the big corporate, like Clearwater, something I can't say, you shouldn't say. But like
the word despise would be a little too weak for me. Because I find these kinds of companies, the first one I noticed like this was back in, I used to listen to KFRC in San Francisco. This was an AM station that would play like Frank Sinatra, a little bit of country music, a lot of garage rock, all the early San Francisco stuff that would just come straight out of the hippie areas. They would play Sly and the Family Stone. They would play this melange of music. But one thing I noticed,
melange of music.
Yes, exactly. It was a spice melange. And one thing I noticed though was that when there was a period when I first started listening, 1967, which was I just happened to get lucky and hit a period when the music was totally changing. That's the year you had the Beatles doing Sgt. Pepper's, the Doors came on the scene, Janis Joplin was changing the way women sang, Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, Janis.
All of this was happening in 67, which would radically change the way music was made from there on out. But I noticed that something was changing at this station. And by 1970, I felt betrayed by the music. What I didn't realize was that there was a large organization called the Drake. I will just call them I know it was Drake, but Drake.
The Dracos. Just call them the Dracos.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Fine.
And they came along and they sold programming to all of these channels across the nation. They before Clearwater might even
it's
connected to them.
You never played D&D, did you?
No, I didn't. I was too old for that.
That's a shame.
It's
necromancy. That's like getting a whole herd of zombies programmed with the same thing.
Right. Well, that's the thing. So, for instance,
this betrayed by the music part. Can you go into that?
Well, one thing I noticed is that if I talk to people who are roughly my age, I'm 66 now. If I talk to people who are within 5 years of my age, we all have different memories of what songs were big. Because if you were in Massachusetts, you had different hit records than if you were in Washington state, than if you were in the San Francisco area, than if you were in Los Angeles. But if I talk to someone from whose primary experience of growing up was more in the 70s, their earlier years when you first kind of discover music, they all have the exact same hits because that's what changed. The music, for instance, I noticed things coming on.
What was the change point?
The change was probably around 69, 70 was the point at which that's when I started feeling like, well, for one thing, I felt the hippie dream, not that I was ever that much a part of it, because I could see the failure of it even as a kid. But the hippie dream was kind of dying. And in my How We Got Here in the hippie 60s part of it, I go into more detail about how that dream died very conclusively.
And you know why it died?
Yeah, because the dream of being a child forever through psychedelics is just that. And without any adults in the room, you can't go anywhere but straight into a brick wall, which is what happened.
Do you find the internet to be psychedelic?
Timothy Leary did. He wanted to die online at the end of the 90s, and I think he did. Well, although, what does that mean? So what if you die online? I'd just rather have a good death than, sit there and be typing away, I'm about to die. It's like, I don't care. But he kind of thought,
do you feel you've earned one?
What?
Do you feel you've earned a good death?
If I were to die tonight, I've done pretty well, because At no point did it was like I always wrestled with things rather than give in to them. Also, I really do believe there is a God who loves us. I really do believe that there's more to the world. We aren't just meat sacks. There is more to the world than the flesh. And I have wrestled to try to understand as much as possible and to try to give something back. If anything, I feel like I haven't given enough back yet. I mean, because I've spent so much time learning stuff. I mean, my personal history is rather, I don't know if you've watched any of the videos where I talk about myself or Paul's interviews with me. Although even with Paul's interviews, I didn't go into much just because it's too much. It's like,
what's your proudest memory?
Proudest? I don't know if pride is the right word. It's more like, it's like,
what do you think has done the most good that you did?
That's different. What do I feel like I went through it? It beat me up, but I came out the other side more in touch with life. And that was going through my mother's death a few years back. And that took 7 months. And the thing about death that I learned that's very different from birth is birth always has like we got a 9-month clock here. If it isn't out by 9 months, something's gone wrong and we got to go in, whereas death, well, this could go on for another 7 months or 7 years. We don't know, and that got very, very dark, just because essentially my mother started to go, insane. And she still recognized me, but near the end, it was getting more and more difficult for her to do so. And in the end, it was just me and her in a room, not in a hospital. She didn't want to die in a hospital. I didn't want her to die in a hospital. She stopped eating the last 7 days. And I just said, okay, well, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. It's obviously, this is the end game. So I just said, let me get out my paper, start writing and noting everything that happens. And I noted some very, very powerful experiences.
Did you catch a lucid moment?
Well, the whole thing was. Because
she was lucid the whole time?
Well, I had to be.
No, she like,
no, she was coming in and out of it, and in and out. Near the end, there was just a glimmer of life. And I could feel, as I held her hand, I could feel the coldness working its way up from her feet all the way to her head. And finally, when her head went cold, that was it. And she was done. And I could tell the instant she was gone. And when that was done, I didn't feel like, oh my God, my mother. I did feel sad, very sad. But I also felt like I did it. I was a good son. I went to the end. I didn't throw her into an institution. I didn't put her in a hospital just to, have IV drips endlessly prolonging what really shouldn't have been prolonged. At the same time, I could understand all sorts of dark thoughts. I could understand why a person would be tempted to put their relative out of their misery. I could understand, these very dark things. And I had different people coming and going, but in the end, it was me and her. And then I had to build the coffin because in Alaska, you could do that. They're very therapeutic.
Oh, yeah.
And then, there was some local people who dressed her because this was a small Alaskan community. And then I had, a couple of handfuls of friends come to the graveside. And we had to do it within 3 days because she was being held in the police freezer. It just
it sounds very Faulkner.
Well, yeah, but it's like reality. That's the thing. It's like, it's like if anyone comes up to me and starts talking about death, and I'm going like, it wouldn't be the first time, but that time I looked it really seriously in the face, and I said, oh, this is death. And I realized it's not the death that's so bad. It's the dying. And that is to say, there's no good way to get to the point where you're dead. I mean, we all wish that, you die in your sleep and you go, oh, and you're dead. It's not going to happen for most people. It's going to be in a car accident on the side of the road. It's going to be a ski accident, falling down the side of a cliff. It's going to be, worse.
That's part of what makes it exciting, is not knowing when it's going to end.
Well, yeah. So when I started going into this, I started noticing the patterns show up about 7 months early. Like I said, oh, this could be it. So I just got myself steeled for it. Fortunately, shortly before that happened, and I think this was from God, I went through some stuff of my own where I had to ask, what's the purpose of being here? You know, I'm not getting anything done. I just feel like everything I'm trying to do in my life is just being sidetracked, and all of this, you know, it's just like I have all these things I can do, but I'm not able to do so much of it. And I went through this dark period. I'd walk down to the pier in the middle of the night, and it was this lonely pier in Alaska, and walk around on it, and you know, just kind of like, you know. But after doing that, it was almost directly after doing that my mother had her first accident that led to the whole process. But for some reason, I was in great shape after that, you know, because one needs to wrestle in order to get in good shape. You know,
you got pulled into a cocoon of sorts and came out a different, something else on the other side.
Yeah. But when it was done, it was like, you know, I you know, you look at something like your mother dying and you say, what is the point of living? And among the things I learned is being a good son all the way to the end and not giving up. That was one point. It's relationships. Life is about relationships.
What is character?
That's a good question.
Because like you could say, like, it'd be easy to take what you just said and say like that it's important because it's a matter of integrity of character.
Well, it
being a good son.
It is, but it's also one can do that for the wrong reasons too. But prove I'm a good son. You know,
what is doing it for the right reasons? What is
right reasons are you haven't got anything to prove.
I mean that's MLK's big was like content of character.
Yeah, exactly.
What is character?
To me, is it like to have character in that sense? What's interesting, there's the verse in Romans where it talks about, you know, faith. Well, it uses these metaphors. I'm skipping. I think it's Romans 5, but it's where it talks about pressure produces endurance, and the word in Greek is very much the same word for like spinning a wine press. You know, pressing down on the grapes. And to me, the character is like the wine. The character, the grape is squeezed. At that point, yeah, fine. But you have to let it sit. And the word...
it's very Wachowski.
Yeah. Well, the word endurance there, I think it's hupomene in Greek, which means hupomene, which means to stay under a thing until delivered. And that's the part most of us are bad at, because we want to get out of...
Help me say that.
Huh?
Help me say that.
It's hupomene. That is the best in my Greek. It's probably spelled HY, but you know, whatever. But it's
I like the poem.
It means to stay under the pressure, and it's the pressure of the wine press until delivered. And then that produces faith, and the faith produces character. And the character to me is the wine, because it's got to suffer. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, I'm living in Georgia now, and everyone knows wine has to suffer in order to be made. It suffers in the ground. The grapes do. The grapes don't like good ground. They
Can
like
you say wine has to suffer in Georgian?
No, I can't.
Can you next time we talk?
I will try, but it's probably
wine has to suffer. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful wine has to suffer. I love it.
Yeah. Well, it's like it's from the whole point of the grapes in the ground. They suffer even. The grapes, they don't want good soil. They don't want that dark, rich soil. They want bad, bland-looking soil that has rocks and stuff in it. That it's kind of like, it's like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And then, you know, they bake under this hot sun, and eventually you have to do something with them, you know. And so, of course, traditionally, a lot of people would step on them with their feet in different cultures. They do that here traditionally. And then they put it in, here they put it in a clay pot, huge clay pot in the ground.
Speaking about being put in a clay pot,
yeah.
What do you think is going on here?
That's very much a death and resurrection image as well. Because
I was thinking earlier today that like maybe Earth is where someone's training their Sardu car. like on the other side of this experience, like we're here to get hard to some, to be good wine on the other side for
Exactly.
some other
I
existence.
do think
What do you
I
make
look at
of all
life
that?
as
Why
a
are we?
test.
What's up with this?
I look at
Yeah.
life as a test. But then again, I don't look at us having a lot of spinning around the dial of reincarnation. I think you've got to make it through this. Good luck. It's like, to me, it's a difficult thing. And I think it's we are generally selfish. And to fight against that, even to say, well, I finally conquered my selfishness. Oops. No, you didn't. Not if you can talk like that. That's what I was saying about character. You can spoil the whole thing by saying, I'm going to prove to my mother that I'm a good son. You can't. All you have to do is go through it. You have to sit under the pressure without complaining as much as possible. That's the hard.
The proving too is the wrong approach. And
you're
going to get bad wine. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the same thing with love, though. That's why love is such a problem. It's because we want, the parent or the spouse who's saying to the other person, don't you see how much I did for you? You just lost the game. Because
you ever sing?
You're saying how much I've done for you.
Do you ever sing, Byrne?
Yeah, I do sing, but that's not what I was saying. I was saying.
Yeah. But like redemption song, does that mean anything to you?
Well, it's Bob Marley, 2 versions.
Tell me more.
Well, he's got one that's acoustic and one that's with.
How's it go?
I don't want to sing Bob Marley.
Won't you say to me like that? Something like that?
Yeah. That's one.
How's it go though?
The freedom.
The song of freedom.
Yes, the pirates. Yes, they rob
I ever had. Right? All I ever had, right?
Is redemption songs.
Redemption songs. Hi, I'm Grim.
You're not
nice
that
to meet you, Byrne.
So, no, one of the things I was saying near the beginning that I figured out about you, you make a lot of references that seem to come from all sorts of strange boxes. I mean, some people live a life where it's like they go to church.
Ghostbusters. You remember Ghostbusters?
Oh, yeah.
Bankman in the beginning. Like
yeah.
The freest. He was like, I grew up, my programming, we got, see.
No, but this is what I was about to say, is that you've got Pentecostalism, you've got heavy metal, you've got gaming, you've got, whatever 80s, are you like more of an 80s child?
77.
So that's when were you born?
Like I came of age from 90 to 95.
But when you were like a lot of people, it's like your earlier experiences.
I'm the ass end of the last one and not quite the next one.
You're like a Gen X or whatever. So
yeah, the last of the X-Men. Call it that.
But that also
Magento.
means you kind of hit the grunge world and all that. Although if you were in the
I got the deep Pearl Jam programming.
Yeah. But it sounds like were you into like death metal, like thrash?
Slayer was too deep. Like Metallica, Guns N' Roses, like cringy pop.
Right. But still, you've got all these weird, like for instance, just putting Pentecostal basket over here and a gamer basket over here and this kind of countercultural music basket over here, right there, without adding all the other just pop culture references from the late 80s, early 90s, whatnot.
Stranger Things. You could just watch Stranger Things and get the vibe.
Well,
it's that generation's like it was a mimetic signaling.
Yeah.
But
the point is you're putting things together. Like for instance, you'll jump in your speaking references, you'll jump all over the place. That's what I mean by natural surrealist. It's like, but it's also
tribe signaling to mimetic tribes. Yeah.
And so I find
it's
that
Darmok and Tanagra. You know how Star Trek were you?
The only Star Trek I really paid attention to was the first series, the original series, and then the movies up to the point I kind of watched a couple of the reboots, but then I lost total interest in it.
God. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but I didn't watch all the secondary waves of television stuff, because by that time I was out of the television world entirely for quite a while.
I was the
reemerged
first
back in.
generation raised by the screen.
I was, but for instance, when I got to New York City, I spent 16 years living in New York City from 1980 to 1996. Never watched, maybe once there was a period for about 6 months where I was staying with a friend and he had a screen and I'd watch a few music videos and stuff, but basically never watched television.
I mean, you were in New York. Why would you watch television?
Yeah, I went to movies.
Television, it's for us people out here.
I had lots of friends who were in bands. I went to art galleries, movies, whatever, all sorts of bizarre stuff. But what was nice about that at that time was it put me so far ahead culturally, as far as the way things were going to deteriorate.
So like you got the Cassandra view. So you saw the wave coming before it crashed.
I knew in the early 90s, like you take your craziest woke gender questioning person, and they still aren't up to those people yet, because they were like so far over the edge. That
because the LSD or what?
No, there were no psychedelics in that time. That was
okay. Over what edge, and what do you mean?
Over the edge of just, there was lots of gender bending going on. There was lots of, but the real thing was I was for a while I was among like performance artists and such, and these people were clinically.
Like body mods, like body modification.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff. But I'm thinking more of people who would do very strange things in public. So I had one friend who used to paint.
That's herself. TikTok now.
No,
they have this thing called TikTok.
No,
they do that.
No, it's nowhere near this edge. That is to say, these people are children, whereas the people I was dealing with were teenagers, even though they were older than that. But it was like, no, one friend used to paint herself completely blue, nude, sing, turn herself upside down, and have people crack eggs over the V that were filled with paint and then rubbed into her body. Now, that isn't TikTok. It's a little too bizarre for even
It's going to be like, I'll drop that last minute of you saying that, and it'll be TikTok tomorrow.
It could be. But like I say, nothing has really surprised me since that period, because I could see, like I got to Alaska and immediately I felt like I had just taken a time machine back about 10 years. And the radio station was stuck in the 80s. And the high school children thought they were really cool because they were listening to, the pop punk music of the late 90s. And I remember one high school girl came up to me. I often was training high school students to be DJs at this radio station. And one girl came up to me and she showed me her new tongue piercing. And I just looked at her and said, "Oh, how 1989 of you."
Right.
And I wanted to put her in her place to let her know, I think you're not cool at all.
Why would you want to do that to her, Byrne? Where's the motivation for that coming from?
I don't like cool. I don't like people trying to be trendy and cool.
So this virtual place, I'm thinking of it now as a time space, whereas like meet space, we're in space time, because like we can always go back to this moment, and like other people are getting at this moment 3 years from now, which is really weird. So this internet thing is kind of time space, and back in space time, I was in a different time space called Google Plus, and I met this guy from Harvard who like went through the doctor thing and then got into programming because he's ENTP or whatever. And he told me that poverty is time travel, and it's like that. It's like you were saying. It's like it's all culturally. It's like waves that emanate from places like New York and Vienna and Paris, and
although
fashions made.
With the advent of the internet, it's all changed. And that is to say, it doesn't matter what city you're in anymore. Because, for instance, there were all sorts of interesting music scenes and such in New York City. And I remember in 1996, there was a store called See Here. And it was a zine store. You remember the little zines for music and all sorts of little countercultural groups. Here's the skateboard punk scene, and here's the the people who like to wear bondage stuff. They had their little zines and all this stuff.
There was a game called The Sims, and they had magazine racks.
Right.
And we got to pick out the interests that way. So I have that association for the things you're saying.
But this was a store you could walk into. And I came back there shortly after September 11th. And I went into the store and I looked at the guy, his name was Ted, and I looked at the racks and I said, I've been gone since 1996 and I haven't seen, are there any new scenes that have developed? Like usually there'd be one every other year or so, some new thing. And he looked at the racks and everything and he goes like, and then all of a sudden it was like a deer caught in the headlights. He went like, no, because and what had happened was this stuff had all mutated online. That is to say,
it like stopped to exist in that media. It's like that platform of time space is deteriorating and collapsing like the and Inside Out.
Yeah. But my feeling though is that we need to get back to reality, the physical thing. And that's why I at a certain point I realized I've been studying music history ever since I was a kid, and I got very serious about it in New York City. And then I went to Alaska, I worked in the radio station. I was very serious about keeping up with things. And then at a certain point I think I realized this about the time Kurt Cobain sucked on the shotgun. I realized that
I'm a conspiracy theorist, Byrne.
It's over. That is to say that the whole idea of rock music as something that's going to change your life and start a revolution and blah, blah, blah is over. And what won the battle of the 20th century was the commercial forces. So it was like Marilyn Manson by the end of the 20th century was doing all this stuff that seemed really rebellious. He's talking about how bad the churches were and the schools and the police. And I'm sitting there going like, yeah, and all these people nobody cares about what they think. And you're on the largest music corporation on earth, Universal Music Group. Yeah, and you're not talking about them at all.
Those beautiful people. The beautiful people. Exactly.
Well, he's becoming one. So Eminem has a song that's very similar. It's just like, do you want to grow up to be just like me? And the answer is no, but what everyone's saying, whether they're thinking about it, is yes. Because we all want to be the images we see.
I caught one like it's like not, I think it might be a country song, but where they show like they make fun of the cultural transmission.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's the existence that, like, for example, if global warming is real, why aren't we building cities like where the new coasts are going to be?
Right.
So like, to me, it's all just like distraction programming.
Oh yeah. Well,
there's too much waste. There's too much waste. There's too much intellectual and creative waste.
Well, that's because we live in a propaganda stew. All of us do. And we're constantly being bombarded with messages. And we tend to look for the messages we want to hear the most. And then to propagate those.
We're being carefully cultivated attention farms and echo chambers of our own design.
But that prevents all of us, including the people creating the propaganda, from doing anything because you're stuck inside your bubble, and
until I saw a video that 12 Monkeys made. But you said you used to clip collage, so
Oh yeah. No, one of the reasons when I first started making tape collages of sounds, there was another guy who is a good friend of mine named Steve Stein, went by the name Steinsky. If you look up Steinsky, like on Wikipedia or something, he was one of the first guys he was the intermediary person between the Grandmaster Flash on the Wheels of Steel kind of DJ, kind of doing the scratching and stuff live, and later the sampling that would be taking place on the various keyboards and computers. So what he was doing was taking tapes and splicing them together in the early 80s. And we became friends because I was using tapes, but I was just recording over and over and over on them different things. And but I looked at what he was doing, which I really liked, and I looked at what I was doing, and then I said to myself, this is a dead end, because in the end, we've cut everything up. I can put together things, and I'm very good at it, obviously. Every now and then I'll let that aspect of what I do kind of slip into a video, but I can obviously put things together. But the most I can do with this is make a little sign waving at people saying, what do you think of this? Is this interesting? Do you like this? Whereas to me, the real game is outside. It's outdoors. I think the reason...
What's the difference between aim and telos?
Aim is just, trying to get to a certain direction. That is to say, if you're going to aim for something, you're trying to get your arrow or your gun to fire in a certain direction and to hit a shot. Whereas telos is to have a reason for doing it. That is to say, you're not simply practicing, but it's like, oh, that person's coming to kill me. I have to do something to stop them. Or, oh, that bird is flying up above me. I need to get that bird down here in order to eat tonight. That's a purpose.
Contextual resonance relevance makes it a telos and not just a name.
Yeah.
So what's like when you said that, like, you saw it was a dead end to do the clip collages, and
in terms of eventually
missing?
All sorts of people would be doing the exact same thing I was doing. Like I remember when the turntablists in the 1990s, people like oh gosh, what are their names? DJ Spooky, and
but all these people you're trying to bring up and reference right now, they're the ones who did it first and got known for doing it.
Yeah.
So even if it is a dead end, if you're on early enough,
but like I was saying,
enough difference in the genre.
I have good proof that I was there a decade earlier, but I also saw, and this is probably the reason why I've never been rich or anything, is because I often see like, yeah, you could do this and make a bunch of money, but it's like it's a dead end. I could already see the dead end, and the dead end is, well,
having to do it for a living. Once you start making money doing it.
But to me, the main thing in life is how we treat our relationships. And that's the relationships with each other, the relationship with God, relationship with stuff, relationship with animals, relationship with the environment, relationship with our governments, relationship with, the street we live on, all these things. That's where the game is. So like doing the thing was a relationship that ended in a dead end for you because you couldn't grow anymore? It was kind of like, it was clever, but it didn't necessarily push the story forward. So for me, so you have some deep need to push the story forward. Well, I have a need to, and I think we all do, to try to communicate what it is we're seeing to the outside world. That is to say, we have stuff playing inside of here. And if you've taken the time to develop some character, then you would want to get some of what you learned out so that someone else might say, well, first of all, someone else might say, is that good? Is that bad? Is that interesting? Is that not interesting? But someone else, even better, is if someone else can learn from you and say, oh, that's really helpful. That's a good aspect of a relationship. You could also run into the other problem, which is suddenly you're creating, faulty issues in all of your relationships. And that happens when we focus our desires upon ourselves. I collect music and books and stuff, not because I just want first editions of books. I don't. Not because I just want really the nicest copies of records. I don't put them all in plastic bags. It's all about learning and then letting it sit. And then at a certain point, maybe, because you can't just run around and push all this stuff on people. Believe me, I've spent some time when I was younger doing a bit of that, and I realized that doesn't go very far. And I can easily, every now and then, I will.
No, what's it about preserving it?
Well, every now and then I realize that I have basically overwhelmed someone with my knowledge.
Yeah, but the stuff you're preserving, the why behind your preservation.
The why is so that, for one thing, I don't believe anything online is going to survive. And the reason for that is next war, people are coming directly after our means of communication. That's what
data centers.
You know, I mean, if the Chinese or the Russians are going to come after the Americans or the Europeans, how are they going to come? They're going to come with a nuclear weaponry over the top? I don't think
that's old school power, Byrne. That's old school power.
So
now we go for how it's information warfare, hearts and minds.
Exactly.
We don't need to take over your data center. We need to take over what you're putting in the data center. Your thoughts and minds.
Exactly. Which is why I tend to keep, for instance, whenever.
Which is why I have people roll savings throws. See?
Yeah.
I'm legendary for leaving them wanting more, Byrne, and working on my stamina. So,
well, I put things in these. I also have books and CDs and albums and whatever. I have a very large library. That's what I'm trying to get from Alaska to here, which the door finally opened because I found a new place to live that's big enough.
Can we build a bunker there?
Huh?
Is there? This stuff needs to be in a bunker somewhere. Can we get? Exactly. Is there a bunker in Tbilisi?
Well, the bunker is the building. It's just solid cement. Old, like 1950s Russian. It's cement everywhere. It's not going to burn down or anything.
All right. Well, we'll hold tight until this clip gets to the right crypto guy. Meanwhile, I have a Patreon. Yeah. Thank you, Byrne. I'm gonna run away now.
Are you done?
I'm out. Let's be friends and talk again.
We will.
Thanks.
Okay, well, take care.
You too.
Where do you live?
Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
Altus, Oklahoma.
Okay.
And Tbilisi, Georgia. Somewhere between. Here we are. There we were.
Yeah, we're about halfway across the world.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.